Hello, River City Church. If you were in service with us last Sunday, I shared an exciting update about certain persons in our church becoming more and more convicted in a good way to respond to our generosity liturgy that we've been reading now for the last couple of months. And that liturgy is not always easy to say, it's not easy to proclaim. Sometimes it's just difficult to even read liturgically together if you're not accustomed to that. But one of the reasons that we did that, instituted the liturgy at that portion of our service, is it felt like giving, even though many people in our church do give, it had become sort of a throwaway in our time of worship together. It would get tacked on at the end of our announcements or right before the break, hey, it's over there. So we really wanted to re-emphasize it, not necessarily for any other reason other than to honor the Lord. Like, that's an important part of our relationship with Him and our relationship with each other. Well, there's one line in that liturgy called "No needy person among us," and some people in our church have really started to take that to heart, wrestle with that. As you pronounce it over and over, it begins to make its way in. That's how formation works. Oftentimes the action precedes the change. So as we've committed to reading that regularly and saying it, some people in our church have been formed by it and are starting to respond and say, what would it look like for there to be no needy person among us? So I mentioned on Sunday this No Needy Person fund. We've had a benevolence fund for a long time, but we're at a place now where other people in our church are saying, look, more so than this being a portion of general giving, what if we had a fund set aside for anyone in the church who has surplus or would like to go above and beyond to give to this fund to make sure that there actually aren't any needs among us, whether that be unsurmountable medical needs, whether that be a crisis, financial crisis. Maybe you've lost someone in your family, a couple has lost a spouse, widow or widower, and now you're in need. Maybe you've fallen on really a series of economic hard times. Perhaps you've been sick and unable to work. Maybe there's some reason that I'm not thinking of, but you're just in a state of crisis financially and you need help. We want, first of all, for you to know that RCC as a church family is growing in our response to those needs, and we want you to have a pathway to ask for help. We want you to have a pathway to say, right now I'm a needy person among us, and it would be a blessing to me for the church to respond during this season and help. And I know for a lot of you, most of you, it's really difficult to ask for help. So we're going to make that possible with a back-end process online, so that the first means of communication isn't you having to find someone on a Sunday or pick up the phone and call them. So you'll see embedded in this email what that process looks like and how you can receive ministry through generosity of your brothers and sisters in the church. So I've got my Bible here, and I just wanted to give you a couple of examples. You know, that generosity liturgy is based really closely to the early church in Acts 2. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. So in the early days of the church, as it was being forged in the midst of the Roman Empire, Israel was recognized, but it didn't really have its own governing authority. It was sort of a rubber stamp king and a rubber stamp government. So really Rome was ruling the world. So when the church was forged in those early times, and didn't take long before it was persecuted, they really came together as a new people, as a new creation, to make sure that no one had need. And you'll see Paul writing letters to one church that he's going to visit to collect an offering for another church in a different city. And there was just really this beautiful sharing of resources to make sure that those who had more than enough could respond in love and kindness to those who did not have enough to provide for their basic needs. So here at RCC, we do focus on our family first when we're talking about no needy person among us. But there's also two other categories, and that's our extended family, so those that we would say are within our sphere of partnership or relationship. Perhaps most closely would be One Love Christian Center. We do a lot of co-ministry with them, co-events with them, and from time to time we do respond to needs that are a part of that church community in a very disadvantaged neighborhood, very disadvantaged part of Jacksonville. But we also have partners all over the world. Now there's a difference between our missions and our benevolence, but I wanted you to know that family, church family, we believe it's biblical, comes first, and then we do have this extended family, and then from time to time, we also help those in the city that are in need. You know, just because we're a church, people find us and reach out, and they don't always have the most honest intentions, but a lot of times they do. A lot of times they are in real crisis and they need help. And I'm not going to read the passage to you, but there's a passage in the Old Testament where God's instructing his people, and he's saying, you know, we want to bring the tithes into the storehouse. So in other words, everyone was giving a 10% of their harvest. It was really, as you looked at it, more than that, but at least this 10% that would come into the storehouse. And he would say, so that there's meat in my house and there's, you know, grain in my house, so that the needs can be met and so that everyone can be taken care of. But there was this other command that said, as you harvest your fields, your farms, your land, as you harvest your wheat, leave the glean. And the glean, if you're not familiar with that, I grew up surrounded by farmland, and there's always the initial run through where they harvest, and then really they can get like half a bale or one more bale out of it if they go over the land one more time and harvest the glean. In other words, what's left from the first time you go through, the first time you pick or the first time you harvest. So he was telling them, leave the glean. You go, well, why did he tell them to leave the glean? And that was for the nomads and the travelers and those who maybe didn't have a home, that were strangers in their land, so that when they came through, there would be some provision for them so that they weren't left out on the cold. So in the cold. So you see this biblical example of what it looks like to care for those among us. And you know, Paul says first, the household of faith first, and we certainly want to do that. And it's amazing that we have people rising to the occasion to make sure that there are no needs among us. And then secondly, we want to make sure that our extended family, those that are church family partners, but are like extensions of us, that we're responding to them and meeting their needs. And then third, we definitely don't want to neglect our city and the poor in Jacksonville and beyond, wherever the Lord may lead us. So we have seen a significant increase in our ability to meet the needs among us because of the generosity of others in our church already. So we're going to give an opportunity for anyone that wants to give to this fund. We don't know what all the Lord's going to do with it, but I do see the potential for many more opportunities to serve and provide when we move over to the St. Nicholas with all of those surrounding neighborhoods. There's such a variety and such a diversity of communities around St. Nicholas that I do think opportunities are going to continue to grow. But we want to start here and say, if you need help, if you're in crisis, if you're unable to provide you know, the meals that you would like to over the holidays, or presents for your family over the holidays, if you haven't told anyone but your light bill's about to get turned off, whatever it might be, okay? We have a process, so don't worry. You can fill out a form, and we can communicate with you and make sure that you're heard, and everything that you'd like to say gets said, and you can explain it in a way that we understand where you are. So we want to make sure that no one goes through this next season, but really the future of RCC, what would it look like to make sure that the needs of those among us are taken care of, so that we can say no need among our church family. So God, we pray that you'll continue to stir up this generosity. God, we pray that as needs arise, that you'll show us what you want us to do. And then Lord, with this surplus of resources specifically for this need, we ask that you will show us what your intentions are. I believe that if you speak to your people about giving, that there's a reason for it. So Lord, continue to show us the reason why, and let us cooperate and be obedient to what you're doing. I love you guys. I pray that we all have an awesome Christmas Eve. And anyway, I look forward to this season together, and I'm grateful for the response in our church. It's an encouragement to me, and hopefully it's an encouragement to you. Be well.